Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and drop a like on this video. I'm trying to hit 100k subscribers on this channel by the end of the week, so your subscription would be much appreciated. Also drop a like, it only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in how the video performs. I have a cold and you can probably hear that. If you can't hear that, well maybe it's just in my head. I can hear it inside my own head, but sometimes it doesn't translate. Either way, that's why I sound like this if I do sound different. Today's video, I want to talk about the Denver Nuggets and the Golden State Warriors series, and if the Nuggets have even a modicum of hope to turn the series around. Not even necessarily to win it, because I think almost everybody would agree that's not going to happen, as most people would have agreed from the very beginning, but at the very least, make this a respectable series. The Nuggets have gotten blown out in the first 2 games of this series, and it has resulted in a lot of discourse. And what's really annoying to me is it's resulted in a lot of slander for Nikola Jokic, even though it's very clearly him playing fine and then the rest of the team not being good. Now, if there's any point of contention you want to make, it's that Jokic hasn't necessarily elevated his game. He hasn't played extraordinary by any means, but overall to me I think it's pretty ridiculous to blame this series on Nikola Jokic. It's really not his fault. He's averaged like 4 assists per game between these 2 games. He had like 3 and 4 in the first 2 games, I believe, and way less than the amount of assists he should have. The amount of great passes that I've seen Jokic make in the first 2 games of this series just for the player to miss the shot, truly mind-boggling. Really, I think the takeaway should be of this series not, oh wow, Nikola Jokic is overrated. The take should be, wow, how the fuck did Nikola Jokic get this team to 48 wins? But regardless of that, to talk about what has gone so wrong for them in the first 2 games, other than the fact that Jokic has no help, is really it's been defense. And it's not like the Nuggets were some powerhouse defensively, but the Warriors specifically have found a way to make their defense really fucking shit. And I will talk about the Warriors at some point. It probably will be a main channel video, how dominant they look, but essentially the Warriors of old, the ball movement, the crazy high pace, the 3-pointers, all of that stuff, as well as on the defensive side of the floor, all seems to be back. And there was some lineup, it was only a lineup that has played 11 minutes in the playoffs so far, and obviously it was in this series, but their advanced stats are through the roof. It was the lineup of basically their 5 best players: Steph, Clay, Jordan Poole, Draymond Green, and Andrew Wiggins. That lineup had a 200 offensive rating and a 75 defensive rating. So that means theoretically they would on average beat teams by 125 points. Obviously, it's an 11-minute sample size, so that would not hold up. But promise for what that lineup would be capable of doing, it's quite terrifying. So the Nuggets, first of all, see themselves against an opponent that they really are just simply outmatched and outgunned. But how could they theoretically, at the very least, put 2 games into this series? Well, obviously they're turning the tides over to home court advantage in this one. When they're going for game 3 and 4 is going to be in Denver. Those would be your 2 most opportune games to actually win in this series. God, it's really hard to say. Like, I'm trying to find like logistical reasons how they could actually take some games out of this series, but like, yeah, Jordan Poole might not be as amazing for the other games of the series, but also Steph Curry's been coming off of the bench and he's been fine, but he hasn't been like electric. So even if Jordan Poole calms down, Steph being back could just easily avalanche the whole thing too. But how would they do it? It would have to be basically Jokic has to go off. It can't just be a decent game from him. Game 1 and 2, he had like 25, 26 points on good efficiency, good amount of rebounds, and again, like I mentioned with the assists, making good passes, they just weren't being converted. It needs to be more than that. We need a 40 piece at least. On top of that, like I mentioned, his teammates need to actually hit their shots. It cannot just be Jokic doing every single thing for them. And then defensively, they got to stop leaving so many guys open on the perimeter. The third quarter of game 2 of this series was insane. I believe that's when the Warriors actually ran that lineup. Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry all got in on the action in terms of their three-pointers. I believe Klay hit 4 threes in the quarter. Jordan Poole hit 2 or 3, and Steph got an and 1 three-pointer on the fast break at that, where he was fouled by JaMychal Green. You just can't allow them to pour it on you quite like that. And a lot of it was just poor defensive rotations, and the momentum was heavily in Golden State's favor. And of course, they're one of the best shooting teams of all time, as they are every fucking year. And Jordan Poole, who has been a percentage-wise not the greatest shooter this year, but volume-wise and difficulty-wise, definitely a good shooter. He has shot a very high percentage while maintaining that volume and difficulty of his attempts. So it's basically like you're dealing with 3 Splash Brothers in the first 2 games of this series. So really, there are 2 main things that have to happen in order for the Nuggets to win a game or 2 games in this series. Jokic and his teammates have to have a really good offensive game. Can't skirt by with Jokic just being fine and his teammates being bad. Outside of like Will Barton was good in game 1 if I recall correctly. And 2, you just can't quite get burned to the extent that you did. Now, I'm not going to expect this team's defense to turn it around to the point where they're going to shut down the Warriors by any means, but you at the very least cannot just basically be a matador allowing the bull to run right by you. You got to step in front of that bull even if it might kill you, wherever that metaphor is going. You can't, they can't keep being so lackluster on their perimeter defense, especially. There's been talk of the exploitation of Jokic in the pick and roll. I mean, that's always going to happen in the playoffs, even though he's much better dealing with it now than he was before. It's still something the Nuggets are going to have to deal with. But as I mentioned, pretty much any time when it comes to a drop defender, though drop coverage is far from perfect, you got to be sure that you are giving the proper amount of criticism to the point of attack defenders for getting lost. And all of the point attack defenders, even Aaron Gordon, who's their best point of attack defender, even though that's not really his natural role, he's really more of like a free safety. It's what he should be, but because they're so lacking in point of attack defenders, he's kind of their primary guy for that. And he's like guarding Jordan Poole one-on-one all the time because of that. Even Aaron Gordon among their point of attack defenders is not doing very good. So I would be concerned about this team going forward on the defensive end of the floor. But if they could just put together a decent enough defensive performance where they get the job done, and if they could have a really good shooting night, I think they can win a game. And if they could do it again, they could win another. But ultimately, I'm not going to say the series is over because anything is possible, as Kevin Garnett famously said. But the odds are not in Denver's favor. At the very least, I think we would all agree on that. So that's what Denver could potentially do to stave off this series. But if I'm being completely honest, this is probably a 4-game series. And as for what that means for Nikola Jokic, I don't personally view this as a criticism of him. I view it as he needs some fucking help. And hopefully Jamal Murray and MPJ will be healthy next year and they can finally compete for a championship, because that core is good enough to compete for a championship. They just haven't been healthy over the last 2 years. But yeah, that is it. Goodbye.